The other thing that's incredible about Singapore is the housing rate. Like the vast majority of people, Singaporeans, own place. Which if you look now in Europe or the US, is completely different.
Meet Simon, a professor from Belgium who's been in Singapore for almost 10 years. He teaches at Singapore Management University and co-founded a company in the sustainability field. Simon shares how capitalism in Singapore differs from the West, whether locals and foreigners are heavily separated in Singapore, and why it's so great to live here as an expat family. I'm Max Chernov, a fellow entrepreneur. Let's go!
What's the best about lifestyle, like your lifestyle in Singapore? What do you like the most here?
Everything works. I think the main thing that I fell in love with in Singapore was that everything is easy. Like you can have a good life, I think, especially if you come in with a good job, and you just don't have to worry about stuff not working. You don't have to worry about being in traffic jams. You don't have to worry about the metro not showing up. You don't have to worry about being robbed. I mean, everything is just there to enable you to pursue your ambitions. And they're, of course, very much focused on work and productivity, but I think that's great. And then ever since we had kids, of course, being able to have a helper, being able to live in a nice house, and being able to sustain that kind of lifestyle where you still have sufficient freedom as a couple to actually do things just the two of you, while you know your kids are well taken care of, and just having that constant help is incredible. And if I would be in Belgium or if we would be anywhere in Europe, having this kind of support system either kind of falls back to parents or other kind of family members, which is a bit hard, or it's almost unaffordable, right? So I think this is one of the main reasons why being in Singapore as a young or reasonably young family has just so many advantages.
In Singapore, I don't know if you feel it or not, it's like, I agree with you, the life is easy, comfortable and stuff, but the way of living of locals and foreigners, especially expats, is different. And it's also different kind of on purpose. Let's say if you take schools, international school versus local school, completely different in terms of how much it costs. And you were talking about the relationships with the healthcare here. It's probably also different for us, for foreigners. Well, for you, maybe it's you now closer as a PR, you're closer to Singapore, to local, but it's different. So it's like kind of separated worlds in some way. You know what I mean?
To a certain degree, I think that is true. I also think that there is actually quite a lot of integration. I think Singapore is an incredible success story of kind of secular state where you don't really have any strong overt religious beliefs kind of influencing how society works. Like you can have, I think there's one street somewhere in Singapore where you have like a mosque, you have a church, you have a Buddhist temple, like you have all of these things, and they all, when one of the religions has some kind of holiday, they kind of all celebrate together. I think that is really the epitome of kind of cultural integration, that is possible at the secular level, which I think is great. On other sides, I think that it's true that many of the expats, probably ourselves included, live in a world where most of the people that we frequently socialize with are other expats. In the work environment, I think that's quite different. I think many of our colleagues are, well, of course you're an entrepreneur, I'm also a professor, so there it's much more mixed. There's much more integration with the locals. Yeah, I think it depends a little bit on how you live, right? So we live in a street here where the vast majority of people living in our street are locals because they probably lived here for a long time, and we rent from Singaporean family. Our kids go to a French-English school where probably about 50% of the kids are kind of kids from, say, white expats. There's also a lot of Indian and Asian kids. Yeah, I think the integration is also what you make of it. In some kind of sports, like, well, we see that, for instance, in like touch rugby, which is kind of popular here. It's there are Singaporean teams, but it's mainly kind of expat teams. Whereas when I used to do dragon boating when I moved to Singapore. Dragon boating is very integrated, right? There it's basically everyone from everywhere, and there's a lot of Singaporeans, Malaysians, Indians that are also joining these teams. So I think some other separation might really be by design, like the healthcare system. I think it makes sense to a certain degree that there are differences that the government kind of stipulates. Yeah, I don't know how they are doing this, because it's like in Belgium, there's this famous publicity, like an ad once done by Samuel L. Jackson about the Belgian healthcare system, where he basically tells this story that he, I don't know, got off the plane, fell off the stairs, broke his leg, and then went to the hospital, and they didn't even charge him anything. And that's not because he was Samuel L. Jackson. That was just because he was on Belgian territory. So you go to the, you're in a medical need, and then it's just, we take care of you. It's the Hippocrates oath, we take care of you, no questions asked. It's not, give us your credit card first, and then we'll see if we can take care of you. And I think that's kind of the policy there. Whether that's always better, I don't know, because it might create a lot of profiteering.
There are some extreme cases, like in the US. You start with credit card for sure if you broke your finger or something.
I've had it when I was traveling in Peru. I ended up in the hospital, and there was also that kind of experience where like, I was having a mild pancreas crisis, which I can assure you is extremely painful.
Oh, shit.
And it was like, I came in like in agony with like 2 other people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we could look at you, but you have to pay first." It's like, pay first, right? And then it's like, okay, we think this is the problem. Go to the pharmacy over there and get your medications. Like, I can't walk. So
it's
differences.
If you get sick or injured abroad, I have something to help you. Safety Wing is a travel medical insurance that will support you in over 180 countries. Even if something happens to your family back home, they cover your flight to them. You know, I always inspire you to explore the world, but sometimes bad things happen. No matter what, I want you to be safe. That's why I recommend you Safety Wing for your next trip. And many guests on my channel already use it and highly recommend it for its peace of mind. Just click the link in description below and travel worry-free with Safety Wing.
How would you compare, let's say, both Europe, majority of Europe is a capitalism, and Singapore is the capitalism. How would you compare the systems? What are the major differences, let's say, on a high level?
The major difference really revolves around how the government finances its operations. I think Singapore, in my opinion, has had for a very long time a very strong industrial policy network. Right? So this is something that the US is starting to do now, and Europe can't do because they can't really make decisions about anything. But Singapore has very tight control over the economy. Like the Singapore government is either directly or through Temasek and through GIC invested in the vast majority of large local companies, and as a consequence can exert policy very effectively and also earn dividends, earn revenue from those companies like a shareholder. Whereas as a consequence, what they can do is the taxation on labor is much reduced, and the VAT and so on are not that high. And what that creates, I think, is a much better incentive system. Right? So if you think about economics very, very simply, we should tax what we want to discourage. We should put a tax on carbon, we should put a tax on waste, should put a tax on cars, alcohol, smoking, all of those things. Right? These are things that are generally bad either for the world or for yourself, and as a consequence we tax them. But we also tax labor, which from an incentive system makes no sense, because you want to encourage labor. You want people to work. And so finding that balance, we tax labor because it's easy in most countries. Right? So finding that balance, I think, is very tricky. And I think that Singapore has found a really good balance that is quite the envy of many other countries. We see this in Europe, in Ireland, which kind of adopted somewhat of a similar policy. But like in Belgium, the tax rate for someone at kind of my level of salary would be 55, maybe even higher %. Right? So then you come to Singapore and you see like the peak tax rate is currently 22.5, 23.5 maybe. So it's just night and day.
What are the disadvantages of this approach?
I think the disadvantages then come, of course, to the reduction of the social state, right? So you're in Belgium, you're unemployed for whatever reason, you have unemployment benefits, you're going to be fine. Healthcare, by and large, is free or almost free and of very high quality. And in Belgium specifically, you don't have road tax, for instance, right? So Singapore, you have ERP, which probably makes like, I once heard like $2 million per day, something like this. I don't know if that number is accurate. But so you have a very different system. The healthcare system here is good, but it's much more profit focused. It has this perception as a foreigner coming into this, because I was in Belgium and in the UK before, both very kind of government-driven healthcare systems, where you never really ask doctors about money, because it's not something that's really part of the transaction. Whereas here, it's always like a very important consideration, even if you have private insurance or very good insurance from your job. It's like, oh, I can't go to this doctor because it's not part of the my insurance. I need to go to. So these things are never considerations. Were never considerations for me before I came here. So I had to adapt to that. So I think that is the downside. There's less of a social security network and less of a social security system, which might make some people kind of fall through the cracks. But we don't see that very often in Singapore. And the other thing that's incredible about Singapore is the housing rate. Like the vast majority of people, Singaporeans, own a place. If you look now in Europe or the US, it's completely different. For most, let's say, 30-year-olds, getting on the property ladder is extremely challenging now in Europe and in the US, even though it's actually much cheaper to buy property in those countries very often than it is in Singapore. But because of the highly subsidized housing and the HDBs, you create a massive opportunity for people to own, plus a very large wealth transfer. It's really kind of a hidden form of social security system where the government builds these amazing HDBs, sells them pretty much at cost, then people own them. And then if they do well later in life, they can sell them and they can maybe go and live somewhere else. They can buy in the private market, or they just stay there and they can live there forever. Well, or 99 years, depending on the leasehold.
Do Belgians know about Singapore, or it's just somewhere in Asia?
I can say for me, I moved here really on a whim. And I didn't even, since the moment I made the decision to move, I didn't even have time to look where Singapore is on the map until I arrived. Because I was so busy finishing my PhD that I just said, yeah, okay, Singapore, sure. I didn't know anything. Literally didn't know anything about it. I just expected that it would be okay. So I don't know if I'm stereotypical, but yeah, I think with my friends that I'm still in touch with in Belgium, what they kind of think about Singapore is they just see this as this super modern, ultra clean, well organized machine of a city, which I think is by and large true. So for the rest, I don't know if they know much.
Yeah, and also like some people say, oh, Singapore is boring. But I remember when we met like a few years ago, with you and your wife, so our families know each other. We did some parties, right?
Yeah.
And you're still into parties, but maybe before kids it was more. And yeah, it was quite intense, right? The party culture.
I don't think Singapore is boring, but it doesn't have much edge. And if you compare it to like places like Bangkok, Berlin, Bogota, South America, like Latin America. Like I've lived in lots of places in South America as well, like Buenos Aires, even London, right? So there is some kind of presence of subculture that is very visible in all of these big cities, which Singapore doesn't really have. And I think that kind of reflects in a quite limited art scene. Not that it's not there, but it's not something that really is part of the lived experience of most people. And I think this is really maybe one of the things that I kind of miss. Now, when I was living in London, it's not that I went to the theater every week or that kind of stuff, but there is just more to it. When I was living in Buenos Aires, there was a moment that we went to a Tchaikovsky concert and there were 75,000 people for classical music. There was Julio Boca, which is a ballet dancer, who did his last dance ever on Avenida Nueva de Julio, which is the biggest street in South America. And there were 500,000 people for ballet.
Yeah.
And so I think Buenos Aires is really an extreme where you have what I would call like high culture that is accessible to the masses. And that people are interested in. And I don't think you really have that in Singapore. I think part of that might be also that there's a really strong culture towards creating economic wealth, and that kind of doesn't really align very often with the creative industries and with arts and crafts, and so maybe it's hard to kind of manifest that here. So there is stuff here, but it's very often foreign, right? So there's not that much of a rich, for as far as I know, and I might be wrong about this, but of a rich theater culture. Like I spent 3.5 years living in Antwerp, which is kind of the capital of theater in Belgium, and arguably beyond Belgium. Yeah, that's like the whole thing about the city, is that basically there's theater, there's arts, there's painters, there's sculptors, and so you don't really have that, for as far as I know, here. I've not been able to discover it, and there are a couple of great theaters like STR and so, but somehow it always feels a little bit more kind of artificial, a little bit more pre-approved. And I think that real art, like successful art, often needs to expose failures in society. It's one of the primary roles of art, to kind of offer a counterweight. And I think because everything is so good here, it's very hard to do.
I think it's also like kind of niche. There are theaters, but just the scale is different.
Yep.
Stand-up comedy is here as well.
Sure.
But how many people go to stand-up comedy? It's like a few thousand people, maybe, like versus 5.5 million people living in Singapore. So it's there, but you can find it. You can find your little bubble with theater, comedy, and stuff.
Yep.
But it's not mass. It's not mass market.
Yeah, we did it. Especially there was this time, I think it was pre-COVID, where you had these comedy nights organized by this Pakistani guy in Heroes. We've been there loads of times. Very fun. And then you have Singapore, also good Singaporean comedians. So it is there, but as you say, it doesn't amount to a visible subculture. And I think that's really what the difference is. At university, I constantly interact with Singaporean students, so I get exposed to what they are interested in.
Okay, what they're interested in. What's the difference? Let's say students' interests here, Singaporeans, versus, let's say, in Europe, in London or in Belgium.
When I was teaching at Imperial, which was 2013, so that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then I was just kind of doing the occasional course to some of the master students.
Imperial in London.
Imperial College in London, where I did my PhD. There, I mean, it's also a very different culture, right? So people come in and they come for their degree, but they're not required to come to class, or it's not really as mandatory as here when you undergrads are not coming to class is very rare. When I was at university in Belgium, I had so many friends who never went to university. Like they never went to class for their entire university career. Whereas here, that's unthinkable, right? If you don't show up in class, you're getting a tick mark next to your names like this person didn't show up, and if you have too many of those, you can fail the course. Right? So there is an expectation and also a points requirement for you to be present, to pay attention, to contribute. None of that was true when I was at university in Belgium. Of course, with SMU also we have smaller classrooms, right? So we work with like between 40 to 50 students, typically around 45 per class. When I started my degree in Belgium, we were 430. And so, the level of interactive teaching and the style of professors is very different. In Belgium, the professor is an orator who stands in front of an audience and talks down at them. Whereas here, I work much more as a conversationalist. Yeah, it works very differently. But I think what students here are interested in SMU, they're very interested in their career. Right? They're very focused on their career. Like, what are they going to do? And of course, there's a lot of dancing at SMU. I don't know if you've ever been.
A lot of dancing?
Yeah.
That's one of the dancing?
This is one of the things that really struck me. Okay. But it's not, I've chatted to students about it. Apparently, it's not SMU students. But so under SMU, so we're in the city center, of course, but there's lots of these hallways, the caves of SMU, right? So which connect to a variety of MRTs. But so after, let's say, 5 or 6 p.m., pretty much any day, there will be hundreds and hundreds of people dancing there. They all bring their own little beatbox. They stand in front of the glass so that they can see their moves. They're all pretty good, for as far as I can tell. And it's just everywhere. It's like, where does that come from? Because it's not something that, even if you've lived in Singapore for a very long time, it's not something you would associate with Singapore, right? You don't think of Singaporeans as, you know what they really like? Dancing.
It's not Latin America, right?
No, but actually I think there's been a Singaporean team that has won numerous international competitions for either tango or salsa. There's some really good dancers around here.
You're a professor in the uni, in SMU. And also you do your side project, right? What are the challenges doing the project like not full-time, but part-time?
The biggest challenge is kind of time management. My job at university is quite demanding. My role as a founder and someone actively involved in business development for Handprint is also quite demanding. My role at Global Mangrove Trust is not very demanding anymore. I'm now a non-executive director, which means I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations anymore. So we've got staff. And so I kind of only join for very strategic projects, maybe help them for grant applications, these kind of things. But it's really, I'm not very actively involved, so the time commitment is very low. But for Handprint, there's a lot more that I'm involved in on a day-to-day basis. And so really comes down to just having really tight management of your calendar. I need to, on a months in advance, block time for all of the different things I need to do. Because my calendar is online and otherwise potential clients or prospects can just book it. I constantly have a 6-month plan in my calendar of like, this is when I do this is when I do this, and you need to do this, and also kind of plan in time for the kids, and so otherwise it just gets away from you. And I think the risk of, well, anyone that's working hard is that you just allow your time to be controlled by other people, then you lose sight of what's really important, which is your wife, your kids, friends, like that. These things are also very important. And so, yeah, trying to balance that is a continuous challenge.
What are the other rules how to manage and balance all these projects apart of that, to block like really important slots in your calendar?
Trust the team. And so as an academic, you're doing research, and I obviously have co-authors, and so that I work with all over the world. And part of it is also being able to delegate, which is something academics in general are terrible at, because we're used to doing everything ourselves. Then when we started the company, it becomes very obvious that most things that you need to do in a company, you're shit at, because you've never learned to do any of those things. Like I don't know anything about marketing or this or building a product or technology or APIs, or like there's a lot of stuff that I just don't know. So we need to build a team together with my co-founders, say like, okay, these are the right people that are going to do this, and you need to trust that they're going to do their job and they're doing it well. Of course, you need to kind of put some reporting and monitoring in place. But I think the biggest lesson that I've learned from now kind of founding Handprint is that when you're trying to build an organization that scales, you need to be a generalist to a certain degree, because you need to keep an insight into what's happening, but you need to let go of a lot of things and not try to control everything. And I think that actually helps a lot in academia as well. Yeah, you need to be able to just start planning a lot better. And I think a lot of the good thing for me with my company is that a lot of the ideas I get by talking to companies a lot now as part of Handprint are potential research projects that I could then go and investigate. So I think in the last couple of years, like virtually every paper that I've written has been directly or indirectly inspired by the work we do at Handprint. And so there is a pretty strong synergy. And of course, as a teacher, when you're teaching students about business model innovation and creativity and how do you do entrepreneurial research, it adds a big layer of credibility when you say, by the way, I've done all of this. I know how hard it is. Like we are doing this on a day-to-day basis with the company as well. So it does help in kind of building that rapport with undergrads, but also especially when you're doing like executive education or you're teaching kind of more senior people, that say, this is not just an academic. This is someone who actually understands business. I talk to companies every day. Many of my colleagues who are also in the business school probably never talk to colleagues because the type of research they do doesn't require them to have in-depth interactions with companies. They rely on large data sets, quantifiable data, and they hypothesize based on theory and then figure out whether or not something is true. It's a very different way from how I do research, which is much more interactive with trying to get an understanding of what's really going on in companies right now, rather than what can we figure out from data from 10 years ago and then see if that kind of still holds.
Do you invest, like personally, do you invest in something?
Yep.
What do you invest to?
I am invested in the stock exchange. I have my SRS account here in Singapore, which I had before I was a PR and keep investing in now. If you are a foreigner or a local and you don't have an SRS account, like you're an idiot. Like this is the most advantageous thing you could do to save money in Singapore. Like I highly recommend everyone should have an SRS account. And then I've been invested in cryptocurrencies for a very long time. So I got into crypto in 2015, maybe, yeah. So even
So
2014.
now you don't need to work anymore.
Well, I never invested enough in cryptocurrencies. I mean, I have a pretty decent portfolio, but definitely not enough to warrant early retirement. Waiting for Bitcoin to go to $1 million, then we'll see.
Hey, wait. Do you invest? I do. I mean, I believe that to obtain the real freedom in life, you have to learn only two things. One is how to make money, another one is how to invest. And there is an app that can help you with that. It's called Moomoo, and it's all-in-one trading platform and your financial companion. So Moomoo offers a commission-free trading and super user-friendly app, which is great, especially if you're a newbie in this world. But also, it has all the tools for seasoned traders. Opening an account is easy and no minimum deposit is required, which is awesome. Plus, what I personally like about Moomoo, they have a lot of educational materials like webinars, tutorials, demo accounts that you can play with, and it's actually perfect if you are just starting your trading journey.
Moreover, I arranged with the Moomoo team that you will get a 20 Singapore dollar cash coupon if you deposit 100 SGD. So that's a 20% bonus right away. Not bad, To claim this offer, use the link in description. So if you aim to grow your wealth portfolio, join Moomoo today and get access to professional tools for your trading journey. Merci beaucoup, au revoir.
Now, my wife and I are thinking about investing or reinvesting some of our money into property.
In Singapore or no?
I mean, I would love to buy in Singapore, but I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, because too expensive, or because the still for PR you pay like how much you pay? 8%, 9% stamp duty tax. Something like that.
I mean, the stamp duty is one thing, right? So I think at some point we'll be able to buy HDB, and that might really be worth doing.
Yeah.
But if you want to buy, I think if you want to buy the place where we live in now,
It's like 3 mil, 4 mil, something like that.
yeah, I mean,
4 mil, 5 mil maybe.
I think this house will probably even be more expensive.
Yeah.
And you need about 34% cash, right? So because the stamp duty is one thing, but you also need to put 25% of the capital cash. That's the requirement. And that, I think, makes it really hard for many people to get on the property ladder. This is a policy I don't really understand. Like, maybe it is really about making sure that people can afford their mortgages, fine. But if you compare this to like the Netherlands or Belgium, in Netherlands, I think you can get 110% of the property value as a loan for a mortgage, because the asset is secured, right? Mortgage, like for banks, mortgages are the kind of easiest thing in general. Like, of course, we had the mortgage crisis in 2008, but that was not really because of mortgages, it was because of the whole system surrounding it. But if you do mortgages as a bank and you know your customer, there's no risk. Like, you give people a house, if they can't pay it off, you take the house, you sell it, you win your money back. Right? It's so safe, generally. So
this 34% you said?
Yeah.
Is for everybody, not only for foreigners. It's just banks don't.
Yeah, so I think it's stamp duty plus 25% of the upfront of the total money, right? So that's a lot of money, right? So if you want to buy like an expensive place, you probably need like 1.5 to 2 million in cash before you can even consider going to get a loan.
Yeah. Or you go for HDB.
Or you
if you're allowed to.
If you're allowed, you can buy HDB, or of course as a PR we can buy in the secondary market. And that's also an option, but then we could not have the same quality of living space if we go HDB than if we're renting in private. So it's a tenuous discussion. The alternatives would be just to invest somewhere, maybe in Bali, maybe in Thailand, maybe somewhere else in Indonesia, to just buy property there and then maybe rent it out half of the year, go there occasionally, but still have something we own. Or we go buy something in Europe and rent it out.
I actually interviewed these guys. They are founders of the company. They're pretty large in Singapore. So what they do is they can help to find you money for real estate, basically. So they have a network of lenders all over the world, not only in Singapore. If you need this 25% cash,
Yeah.
so you can go to the guys. They work as a bank, basically.
I've seen
a
that
private bank. Yeah.
interview,
We'll
yeah.
put the link in the description if you're interested. What's your main principles in life? Something that, let's say your kids are 3-year-old now, both of them. So let's say when they are like 6, 7, 8, something really important for you that you want to pass to them.
I'm not sure if it's a main principle in that, but Anna and I went to see Hamilton, and we both had like one sentence from Hamilton that stood out, like,
Yeah.
I'd rather be divisive than indecisive. I really like that.
Yeah.
I think this reflects my personality quite well. I'm not sure if I would teach it to my kids. I would say it's okay to go against the flow if you really believe in, if you're really convinced about your convictions. I think that's quite an important lesson that I would teach them. I think it is important for people to kind of pursue what they want to do, even if other people tell them like this is a bad idea. It's like, well, we'll see. Yeah. It's okay to fail. I think the big lesson from entrepreneurship is that failure is valuable. Right? So it's okay. Try things, fall on your face, get back up and try again. I think it's one of the things I always admire when you see young kids. Like the amount of time in a day, you know this as a father of young kids as well, that they cry as if the world is ending is enormous. It doesn't matter for like the smallest, silliest thing. No, Daddy, I wanted to close this. Who cares? Or my daughter once had a hissy fit for 10 minutes because I flushed after she went to the toilet. Furious. And I was like, what is this about? Right? But they're super angry, and they get up, or they fall and they hurt themselves and they get up and they try again. But I think as we grow older, we lose that ability, that tolerance for our own failure. I think we were in the airport yesterday, and Anna and I were kind of joking about the fact that the flight was slightly delayed, and so our kids were just like, first spent 25 minutes going up and down the escalator, which was apparently fun, and then another 20 minutes just running up and down in between the rows of people sitting there on their phones, just like running like madmen and running back, and then I'm so tired, running again. It's like, imagine that we would not unlearn that kind of behavior, that all adults would be doing this. What kind of world would that be? A world where play was just totally normal. I don't know, I think try to kind of maintain these things, right? As long as you can. That resilience and that creativity, and maybe also part that like je m'en foutisme of like, I don't care what other people think. I am right here in the middle of a big room and I want to scream as loud as I can. And they just do it.
Yeah.
We all unlearn these things, and maybe we should try to hold on to those a little tighter.
Yeah, let's do it after the interview.
Yeah, sure. Can do it now.
What's the meaning of life for you?
Find and fulfill your purpose. I have this long-standing belief, this is going to be very weird, right? But I have this long-standing belief that I'm immortal. I went to a chakra therapist when I was living in Antwerp. She told me that I have no karma, which basically means that I should be dead, according to chakra philosophy. And said like, so you came back on this planet to do something meaningful. You chose to come back even though you didn't have to, as a free-floating soul. And that kind of always stuck by me, because for me, it kind of aligned with my own perception. Like, I want to do something important. And I had this thing when I was 10 years old, my mom asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I said I wanted to be the first person in the world to win the Nobel Prize for Peace and Economics at the same time. So it gives you a sense of my ambition. But there was like, all of these things kind of clicked together for me. It's like, maybe there is something that I just came here to do. And then I think when we set up Handprint, it really felt like that's the area in the world where I can hopefully make a big difference. And so for me, that kind of finding your purpose and kind of pursuing it, like, again, against maybe what other people recommend, is important. So maybe like another kind of story around this, when I was doing my first degree in Belgium, I wrote my dissertation on Buddhism and economics, on what would a capitalist economic system look like if the goal was the alleviation of all suffering rather than profit maximization. It's very kind of within the field of business ethics. And then I spoke to my supervisor for this dissertation, said I want to go and do a second master's degree in corporate social responsibility, or what is now ESG. And he told me, like, sure, you can do this, but you should know that you will never make as much money with that degree as without that degree. Right? And I was like, I don't care. Like, I think I want to do this. So I had this kind of sense of purpose. And then after that, I went traveling. I went back to Belgium. I wanted to work in sustainability consulting. It was just, I got back to Belgium 1 week before Lehman Brothers collapsed. So there were no jobs anywhere in anything. It was that financial crisis in 2008. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll go work in a bar until I get a job in sustainability consulting that I wanted. And so I think that kind of strong sense of purpose has always kind of driven me. And then that's probably what I think is the meaning of life. It's like, find that in your professional and in your personal lives. Like, what is it that you really want to do? And once you find it, just hold on tight and try to make it real.